My parents told me, you won't belong at this wedding. Then they boasted from their grand suite, calling it the most exclusive room. But from the penthouse of the $300 million resort, I said, cancel the bridal suite. They're not cleared to stay there. Minutes later, chaos broke out in the lobby, and my phone blew up with 38 missed calls. Have you ever been completely erased from your family's story, only to discover they're living out their biggest moments in a world you secretly built? I'm talking about getting disinvited to your own brother's wedding, then finding out it's being held at the luxury resort you own. They thought they could ignore me, but they were about to step right into my carefully constructed empire. The air conditioning in my Denver office hummed a quiet lullaby, barely covering the distant city noise. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across my polished desk, glinting off a stack of contracts for Alpine Haven's summer expansion. I'd been signing papers for an hour, lost in the rhythm, when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the name. It had been weeks since we'd last spoken, and every call felt cold, deliberate, like talking to a stranger who knew my name. I took a breath and answered. Hi, Mom. Claire, she said, her voice soft, careful, like someone about to drop a stone into still water. I wanted to tell you about Ethan's wedding. I froze, my pen halfway through a signature. Oh, it'll be small. Just family, very intimate. You understand, right? A pause stretched, long enough for me to hear the ticking of the clock above my door. I set the pen down. Of course, I said quietly. She exhaled, almost a sigh of relief. You've got so much going on with the company anyway, and honestly, it's just a different kind of atmosphere. I'm not sure you'd feel comfortable there. Different kind of atmosphere. I almost laughed. Right, I murmured. She kept talking, filling the silence, the way she always did when she was nervous. It's at a beautiful place, dear. Ethan and Sophie wanted something elegant, but private. You'd love it, I think. Anyway, we'll send photos. You'll see how beautiful it turns out. Sure, I said. I'm happy for them. Good. She chirped, her tone lifting with finality. I knew you'd understand. The call ended with that soft click of disconnection. For a long moment, I didn't move. The quiet in the room felt heavy, like the silence after an insult you've heard too many times to react to. The city outside gleamed under the late June sun, glass towers reflecting gold. Everything sharp, everything distant. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. Family. The way she said it. Small. Exclusive. Like a club I was never invited to join. After a moment, I turned back to my laptop. A headline blinked across the screen from a hospitality newsletter. Ethan Morgan and Sophie Bennett to wed at the renowned Alpine Haven Resort. For a second, I just stared. My fingers hovered. Then a low, humorless laugh slipped out. Of course, I whispered. The irony was almost poetic. The very family who told me I didn't fit and had chosen the resort I built from the ground up. Every marble tile, every chandelier, every mountain view suite. They were walking into my creation without a single clue. I clicked open the company dashboard. Reservations. Guests. There it was. Morgan wedding party, check-ins, scheduled for Friday. The system flagged the booking as very important person. I let my head fall back against the chair, eyes tracing the ceiling. Sometimes, I thought, they invite the whole world except the person who built the stage. The words came out calm, not bitter, just fact. Outside, the city started to dim. Street lights flickered on, dusk settling. I could see my reflection in the glass, tailored blazer, hair pulled back neatly. Every inch the composed executive they never believed I could be. My phone buzzed again. Harper. I answered. Harper. Hey, boss, she said. You asked me to confirm this week's guest list. Yeah. Anything interesting? A brief pause. Papers rustling. Let's see. Corporate retreat from San Francisco, wedding party from Texas, and she hesitated. A family named Morgan booking for the grand suite. I'm guessing you know them? I let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. Yeah, I said softly. I know them. Harper's voice dropped, cautious. Do you want me to flag the reservation? No, I said, leaning forward, elbows on the desk. Keep it as is. Let's make sure everything goes smoothly. Understood. When the call ended, I sat there for a moment, the corners of my mouth curving slightly, not into a smile, but into something colder, steadier. They hadn't invited me. That was fine, because soon they would walk into my world, under my roof, on my terms. The office lights dimmed automatically. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked to the window. Below, Denver glittered like a map of constellations. I touched the glass lightly and whispered to no one, "You built a world without me. Let's see how it feels when you have to live in mine." And with that, I turned off the lights, leaving only the city's glow behind me. Morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the Denver office in a pale gold that made everything look cleaner than it really was. I stood by the counter, waiting for the coffee machine, when my phone vibrated. A notification banner slid across the screen. Morgan wedding weekend officially begins. The first image was Ethan and Sophie standing under an archway of white orchids, the mountains blurred in the background. Sophie's caption, sweet and sugary, the perfect start to forever. My mother's comment sat right beneath it. So proud of our son. Dad had added a heart. That was all. No mention of me. I took a sip of coffee that had already gone cold. My stomach clenched, the way it always did when I saw their perfect public smiles. That practiced performance of family unity. They'd gotten good at posing without me. The glass door slid open. Harper came in, scrolling through an iPad, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun. "Morning," she said, carefully testing the temperature in the room, before adding, "I ran through the event list for the weekend. There's something you might want to see." She handed me the tablet. The Alpine Haven booking interface glowed. Guest name, Morgan Wedding Party, reserved for 4 nights, grand bridal suite, special rate code applied. They used a corporate discount, Harper said, lowering her voice, under Alpine Haven's internal partner program. My eyes narrowed. Who authorized it? She swiped to the contract page. Linda Morgan, she read aloud. Signed as authorized by family. I stared at the screen for a long beat, then handed it back. Family has a lot of definitions in my world. I said, finally. Harper frowned. Do you want me to fix it? I can flag it to accounting. I shook my head. Not yet. Let them have their perfect weekend. Harper hesitated, like she wanted to say more, then nodded and slipped out. I moved toward the wall of framed photos that lined the hallway, portraits of our resorts across Colorado, Utah, Montana. Each one represented a decade of work, sleepless nights, calculated risks. I paused in front of a picture of Alpine Haven's opening ceremony 8 years ago. I stood at the edge of the crowd in that photo, smiling for the camera, anonymous. Even then, they'd never shown up to the ribbon cutting. I ran a finger along the edge of the frame, feeling the chill of the glass. In my head, my mother's voice from the phone echoed, asterisk different atmosphere, dear. You wouldn't fit in, asterisk the irony almost made me laugh. I walked back to my desk. The coffee had gone bitter, but I drank it anyway, watching the sunlight shift across the floor. My inbox pinged. Subject, invoice confirmation Morgan wedding. I opened it. Wedding charge, $48,000. Charged to Alpine Haven corporate account. I stared at the number, the line of text pulsing faintly, as if daring me to react. $48,000 of company funds, asterisk my asterisk funds, used by the same people who decided I wasn't family enough to attend. I leaned back, letting the absurdity of it settle. A small laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Perfect, I murmured. The city outside was already warming under the sun, the hum of traffic rising. Somewhere in the mountains, my brother and his fiancée were preparing to check into the resort they believed belonged to someone else, posing for photos, sipping champagne, telling guests how proud their parents were. I closed the email and set the tablet aside. Let them, I whispered, let them have their perfect pictures. For the next hour, I buried myself in work, reviewing proposals, signing digital approvals, answering messages that had nothing to do with weddings or family. But no matter how hard I tried, every so often, my eyes drifted back to the window. I could almost see the mountains from here, faint outlines on the horizon, the same peaks reflected in the photos Sophie had posted. At noon, Harper knocked lightly and peeked in. "We've had confirmation of their arrival tomorrow," she said. "Would you like the staff to be briefed about anything?" "Only this," I said. "No one mentions me to anyone." "Understood." She lingered a second. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" I met her eyes, calm. "I'm perfectly okay." "Harper." They wanted a perfect weekend. Let's make sure they get it. After she left, the room grew still again. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint vibration of a notification that had just arrived. I picked up the phone. Another post, another caption. "Our dream wedding begins tomorrow at Alpine Haven." I let the screen go dark in my hand. "They've already written their story," I said quietly to the empty room. "They just don't know who owns the ending." I turned off the phone, stood, and walked out of the office. In the corridor, the scent of coffee and paper lingered. The framed photos on the wall caught the light as I passed. Colorado, Utah, Montana, each one a reminder of everything they thought I wasn't capable of. By the time I reached the elevator, I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. The button lit up under my finger, and the doors slid shut with a muted click. As the elevator descended, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Composed, still, unreadable. I straightened my blazer and whispered under my breath, "Now they're really in my world." When the doors opened to the lobby, I stepped out, the sound of my heels echoing across the marble floor, and the camera of some distant memory clicked shut behind me. The conference room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. A stack of papers lay open in front of me, contracts, invoices, and one particular document that caught my eye. I turned the page, my thumb stopping at the bold signature at the bottom. Linda Morgan, co-owner. My mother's neat handwriting stared back at me, elegant and false. I traced the ink lightly with my finger. Even her forged signature looked confident. The world outside the glass walls of the room shimmered under Denver's sun, but my mind drifted far from it. I could almost smell the faint mix of bleach and coffee from that hotel in Seattle where I used to work. The memory came back sharp, like a cold draft through an open window. I was 20, wearing a second-hand uniform that didn't quite fit, carrying trays heavier than I was. Dad had stopped by one night after a business dinner downtown. He didn't even sit, just stood there in the lobby, looking around the small, worn-out place like it offended him. "Claire," he said, his tone clipped, "you need to start thinking realistically. Learn something useful. Computers and travel apps won't pay your rent forever." I remember gripping the tray a little tighter. "I like what I do." He sighed. Liking something isn't the same as being successful. The conversation ended there, like every other one with him. At home, Ethan's acceptance letter to a marketing firm sat framed on the mantel. Mom had posted a photo of it online with the caption, "So proud of our son. He's the future of this family." No mention of me, of course. I'd already become the silent background of their perfect picture. I learned to smile through dinners where my father's voice filled the air with business talk, and my mother's laughter followed Ethan's stories about clients and campaigns. I learned to shrink without disappearing completely, to be polite enough to stay invisible. I learned to stay quiet. When they laughed, I whispered to myself, now flipping the forged contract shut, and to remember every word they said. The flash of memory shifted again to the small apartment I rented on the outskirts of Seattle. It smelled of burnt coffee and determination. I worked nights at the hotel and spent every spare hour coding on an old laptop that overheated every 30 minutes. Sometimes I'd look at the city lights through the cracked window and imagine a different version of myself. Not the invisible daughter, not the family disappointment, just someone building something that mattered. There were days I wanted to quit, nights when I'd watch the cursor blink on the screen, mocking me. But the one thing about being underestimated all your life, it trains you to survive on quiet defiance. By 2016, the small travel platform I built, Haven Go, had grown faster than I could handle. When a venture group offered to buy it for $50 million, I didn't celebrate. I just sat in a borrowed conference room downtown, signed the papers, and went home alone. No champagne, no family dinner, just silence. I remember calling Mom that night anyway. I don't know why. Maybe to see if she'd sound proud. Mom, I'd said, my voice shaking, I sold the company. The one with the app? She asked vaguely. Oh, that's nice, dear. You'll finally have time to settle down now. Settle down. 2 words that felt heavier than the rest of the conversation. After that, I stopped trying to tell them anything. The money didn't change much about me. What it did change was what I could build. I bought a piece of land in Colorado, a forgotten patch of mountain where the snow never melted completely, and I built the first alpine haven there. Wood, glass, stone, strong, honest materials. The grand opening was quiet, just how I liked it. I stood on the balcony, snowflakes catching in my hair, watching the lights glow against the mountainside. I thought of them that night, of how they'd never see it, never ask, never care, and realized it didn't matter. I didn't need them to see it. I just needed it to exist. The memory faded, and I found myself back in the present, sitting in the same chair, the forged signature still staring up at me. I closed the folder slowly, the leather cover snapping shut like punctuation. Harper's reflection appeared in the glass wall before her voice reached me. Everything okay? I turned. Everything's fine. She hesitated, stepping closer. You found something? I tapped the folder once. Just an old habit. My mother signing things that don't belong to her. Harper frowned. Do you want me to handle it? No, I said. Not yet. She studied me, unsure. Are you going to tell them about who you are? About owning it? I looked out the window. The mountains stood faint and blue in the distance. No, they'll figure it out soon enough. When they walk into a place they think is theirs. Harper nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. I turned back to the desk, pulled my laptop closer, and began typing a new message to the resort's management team. Subject: Protocol for Morgan wedding party. Maintain professionalism, no personal disclosures. CEO identity remains confidential. I hit send, leaned back, and exhaled. For a moment, I let the silence fill the room again. My eyes drifted toward the window, where the late afternoon light cut sharp lines across the floor. Somewhere in those mountains, preparations for Ethan's wedding were already underway. Flowers, champagne, laughter. I smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. They'll get their perfect day, I murmured, and I'll be right here watching them walk through the empire they once told me I'd never build. The hum of the city below filled the quiet as I closed the contract folder for the last time. The first black SUV rolled up the curved driveway, just as the morning light settled over the peaks. From my office window, the view looked like something out of a travel brochure, the lake shimmering, the glass facade of Alpine Haven reflecting sky. Down below, the staff lined up in their pressed uniforms, smiling like they'd practiced for weeks. I recognized them instantly as the car doors opened. Ethan stepped out first, in an immaculate gray suit, despite the mountain air. Sophie followed, all styled perfection in her white jumpsuit, camera crew trailing behind. Mom, Linda, was next, her hair sprayed into place, the same smile she wore at every charity event. Dad adjusted his jacket, surveying the resort like a man inspecting property he might want to buy. "Welcome to Alpine Haven Resort, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan." The concierge greeted warmly. "We're honored to host your family this weekend." Linda laughed, waving one hand elegantly. "It's beautiful, just like the photos." She turned to the cameras. "Isn't this incredible, Sophie?" Sophie grinned at her phone, already live streaming. "Guys, we just arrived at the most gorgeous resort in Colorado. Wait until you see the view from our suite upstairs." I watched them through the tinted glass, coffee in hand. Harper stood a few feet behind me, tablet open, her tone low but steady. They requested white orchids, premium champagne, and a room with the Snow Peak view instead of the valley. They also asked to use the bridal balcony for their welcome video. I didn't turn around. "Approve everything," I said. "Everything." Harper sounded surprised. "Give them what they think they deserve." She hesitated. "Okay." Outside, Linda posed for a picture beside the entry fountain, holding her son's arm. Sophie did a quick twirl for the camera. Their entourage followed them through the lobby, filming the chandeliers, the polished floors, the hand-carved maple banisters. I could hear their voices faintly through the security feed speakers. Compliments, laughter, small talk. Sophie's voice cut through most clearly. "This is going to be a dream wedding." I smiled faintly. Dreams have their costs. Downstairs, the marble lobby gleamed. Every piece of furniture had been designed to reflect warmth and luxury. Soft leather chairs, woven carpets from local artisans, a grand piano near the fireplace. It was a space meant to make guests feel small, but special. Linda thrived in places like that. I switched screens on the wall monitor. Camera angles flicked through the property. The Morgans in the elevator, laughing. Sophie adjusting her hair. Ethan checking his reflection. Dad scrolling through emails. Same performance. I murmured. Harper looked up. "Sorry." "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just watching old habits." A knock came at the door. Peter, the operations manager, stepped in, holding a folder. "Morning, Miss Morgan. The VIP arrival form you requested." He handed it to Harper, who scanned through, then froze slightly. "Claire," she said carefully, "you'll want to see this." I turned, taking the folder from her. There it was, our corporate check-in form, signed in confident cursive. Linda Morgan, co-owner, Alpine Haven Resorts. I stared at it for a long moment, then let out a quiet laugh that startled both of them. Peter shifted awkwardly. "Should I report this to legal?" I closed the folder, setting it gently on the desk. "No," I said, "not yet." Harper frowned. "She actually signed as co-owner." "Apparently." I leaned back in my chair. That's a new level of confidence, even for my mother. Outside the glass, the family moved through the atrium. Sophie filming everything from every angle. The marble floors, the mountain light. This is perfection. Linda's voice carried faintly through the security audio. "Your father and I should come here more often." It feels like it was made for us. I glanced at Harper, who was watching me closely. She's not wrong, I said. It was. For the next hour, I watched the flurry unfold. Staff escorting them to the grand suite, photographers clicking, floral designers rushing with orchids. They were creating their picture-perfect moment, every detail carefully staged. On one monitor, I saw Mom standing by the front desk, laughing with the concierge, as if she truly believed her name carried authority. Here, she had always been good at that, turning pretense into presence. Sophie's voice rose again. Mom, come stand by the fireplace for this one. The lighting's amazing. I switched the feed off. Harper, I said quietly, send the spa team to offer them the best welcome treatment we have. Champagne, the snow suite, upgrade everything. Harper blinked. You're really giving them the full treatment. Yes, I said, standing, moving toward the wide glass windows. Let them have it all. Every indulgence they think belongs to them. She closed her tablet, uncertain. What's your endgame here? I looked out toward the peaks, their white edges cutting into the blue sky. Nothing dramatic, just perspective. For a moment, silence filled the office. Steady, deliberate. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. An internal notification from accounting. I picked it up, scrolling through the email, and there it was, another authorization form attached. The same forged signature, this time approving a shipment of imported champagne. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. She really thinks she's the owner. Harper raised an eyebrow. And you find that funny? Almost poetic, I said. They spent years pretending I wasn't part of this family. Now they've built their big moment on my name and still don't know it. She studied me, but I didn't elaborate. Outside, the family stepped onto the terrace. The wind catching Sophie's veil as photographers snapped away. Linda fixed the flowers. Robert checked his watch. Ethan smiled on cue. Through the glass, they looked almost cinematic, like the happy family portrait they'd always wanted. I caught my reflection in the window, faint and distant, a shadow against the bright view, my face calm, my eyes unflinching. Behind me, Harper placed the signed contract back on the desk. The gold ink gleamed under the light. Perfect timing. I murmured, my voice barely audible. A forged signature, a borrowed title, and a perfect family photo. Couldn't ask for a better setup. Harper's brows knit. Set up for what? I smiled without turning. For them to meet the real owner. I reached for the folder again, tapping the edge against the desk before setting it down. Fake ownership, I whispered. Harper said nothing. The silence between us was thin and sharp as glass. Down below, the Morgans posed for another picture. Sophie blew a kiss at the camera. Linda beamed, and Ethan looked up briefly toward the building, toward the top floor where I stood. For a moment, our eyes might have met through the glass. Then he turned away, smiling for someone else. I exhaled slowly. Let the show begin. The sun had climbed high over the peaks, flooding the room in light. I turned away from the window and sat down again, the folder with my mother's signature resting on the table like proof of a story only I understood. The conference room smelled faintly of coffee and Abigail Green's signature blend of control and impatience. She sat across from me at the glass table, dressed in black, her posture straight, every word measured. Claire, she said, her voice clipped. We're finalizing the sale of 30% of your shares by the end of next week. I can't afford distractions right now. No press noise, no family drama, no rumors about ownership. You understand. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms loosely. You have my word, Abigail. Alpine Haven doesn't do drama. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the folder in front of her. Good. Because if I sense even a hint of scandal, if anything compromises investor confidence, I'm pulling out. I don't invest in emotion. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. For a woman who claimed to hate emotion, Abigail thrived on intimidation. She stared at me a moment longer, searching for a reaction. When she didn't get one, she gathered her papers and stood. Keep your personal life invisible. That's how you stay powerful, Claire. Trust me, I said, rising with her. No one's ever accused me of being too visible. She gave a tight smile and left, her heels clicking down the marble hallway. The door closed, and for a moment the silence in the room felt heavy. I loosened my blazer, exhaled, and looked out at the skyline. The Denver afternoon was bright and unforgiving. My phone buzzed against the table. A message from Harper lit up the screen. Ethan's team just sent a new request. He wants the staff list updated to include him under family of owners. I read it twice, then laughed under my breath. Family of owners. Of course. I typed back, approve it. Let him have his title. Almost immediately, another bubble appeared on the screen. Are you sure? Yes, I replied. My family's always been fond of labels. I put the phone face down on the table and stared at my reflection in the black glass. It was strange how easily they took credit for things they never built. Maybe they actually believed it after a while. Say something often enough, post enough photos, and it becomes true. I walked to the window, pushing my hands into my pockets, watching the sunlight catch on the glass towers below. In their world, power was about how loudly you could say you had it. In mine, it was about knowing you didn't need to say a word. After the meeting, I drove to the parking deck behind the building. The air outside was cooler now, the sun slipping lower, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. I leaned against the car, letting the wind move through the silence. A few floors above, I could see the Alpine Haven logo gleaming against the glass. Elegant, serene, untouchable. Everything I'd spent years building now served as the backdrop for a family that had once laughed when I said I'd own something like this. My phone vibrated again. This time it was Harper calling. Hey, I answered. Sorry to bother you, she said, her tone cautious. Another request just came through from the Morgans. Mrs. Morgan wants the staff to address her as Mrs. Morgan, owner of Alpine Haven. For a second, I didn't respond. A slow smile spread across my face. Of course she does. Harper hesitated. Do you want me to correct her? No, I said, opening the car door, but not getting in. Let her have it. Let them all have it. Are you sure? It's a little strange. Nothing strange about it, I said quietly. They've been pretending long before today. Just keep treating her exactly how she wants to be treated. There was a pause. I could almost hear Harper thinking. Okay, she said finally. I'll tell the staff. Good, I murmured. Then we wait. When the call ended, I stayed there for a while, watching the traffic move below. The sound of the city felt distant, muted. I thought about Abigail's words again. No emotion, no noise, no scandal. She'd get her wish. There wouldn't be noise, not from me, but silence in the right hands could be louder than anything. I glanced at my reflection in the car window. The setting sun painted half my face in light, the other half in shadow. It seemed fitting. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed once more. An email this time from Resort Management. Subject: Morgan Party VIP requests. I opened it. The bullet points scrolled down the screen. Floral arrangements, champagne upgrades, special meal requests, media access clearance. At the bottom, one line stood out. Mrs. Morgan requests a personal welcome from the resort owner upon arrival. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Asterisk, you'll get your welcome, Mom. Just not the one you're expecting. Asterisk, I got into the car, the leather seat cool against my back. For a few minutes, I just sat there, listening to the soft hum of the engine. The irony of it all was so sharp, it almost felt like humor. My mother asking to be greeted by the owner of a resort she thought she owned. My brother demanding a title he didn't earn. And me, the invisible daughter, orchestrating every move from behind the curtain. As I drove out of the parking structure, the light hit the windshield just right, washing everything in gold. In their world, power was measured by cameras, invitations, and attention. In mine, it was built quietly, line by line, brick by brick, until one day it stood so tall that they had no choice but to walk through its doors. The drive to the mountains took 3 hours. The road curved higher, the air thinning as the sun dropped behind the peaks. When I reached the outskirts of Alpine Haven, the resort glowed like a mirage against the darkening sky. I parked at the side entrance, away from the main road. The scent of pine and cool air filled the car. For a long time, I just watched the lights from the lobby windows flicker across the parking lot. I imagined them inside, my family laughing, drinking, talking about how perfect everything was. My phone buzzed once again. Harper's message appeared on the screen. They're checked in. Mrs. Morgan insisted the staff call her owner. Everyone complied. I smiled faintly, sliding the phone into my pocket. Perfect, I said to the empty car. Keep calling her that. For now. The mountains stood silent around me, dark and endless, the resort glowing in their shadow. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the silence sink in, deep and steady. In a world full of people desperate to be seen, sometimes the greatest power came from being the one no one noticed. Until it was too late. The lobby glowed in shades of gold that night, the kind of light designed to flatter everything it touched. Chandeliers sparkled above marble floors. The grand piano hummed quietly in the corner, and the air smelled faintly of orchids and champagne. It was the night before the wedding, and Alpine Haven looked like it had been built for a fairy tale. I stood near the bar, half in shadow, a glass of wine resting between my fingers. From where I stood, I could see them. The Morgans moving through the room as if they owned it. Mom walked arm in arm with Dad, her smile radiant, her posture proud. Every detail is perfect, she told a passing florist. Exactly the way I imagined. It's just so us. Dad chuckled under his breath. That's because you made sure of it. She beamed, lifting her chin. It's the Morgan touch. A pair of guests nodded politely, clearly impressed by her certainty. She thrived on moments like this. Adoration, admiration, illusion. At the reception desk, one of the front staff stepped forward, her voice bright and professional. Mrs. Morgan, welcome again. The CEO wanted me to extend her gratitude for your presence. Linda blinked, surprised, then smiled with amused grace. Oh, how sweet. Claire must have put her up to that. The staff member looked confused. I'm sorry, ma'am. Linda waved a manicured hand dismissively. Claire, she works here, doesn't she? In management or something? From where I stood, I could see Harper stiffen slightly behind the concierge desk. Her eyes flicked to me as if asking permission to intervene. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Linda laughed softly. It's fine. She's always been so diligent. I'm glad she found a place that appreciates that. The staff smiled awkwardly and excused herself. I took a slow sip of wine. The glass caught the chandelier's light for a moment, refracting gold across the surface. Harper appeared a few seconds later, sliding into the seat beside me at the bar. She didn't say anything at first. They're enjoying themselves, I said. Finally, she followed my gaze to the group across the lobby. Mom was now leading Sophie through a tour of the space, pointing out the arrangements and decor like a curator unveiling her latest exhibit. Tasteful, Mom said to Sophie, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Classic, not overdone. It feels like a real Morgan wedding. Sophie nodded eagerly. Absolutely. Everyone's going to talk about it. This is what perfection looks like. I could almost hear the satisfaction in my mother's breath, the same tone she used whenever she found a new way to erase me from the frame. Harper's voice was soft. You sure you want to be here right now? I'm exactly where I need to be. Across the lobby, Sophie lifted her phone, smiling toward the camera. Okay, everyone. Behind the scenes at the most stunning resort in Colorado. Tomorrow's the big day. Her followers flooded the comments, instantly hearts and congratulations streaming up the screen. Linda leaned into the frame, waving like royalty. The sound made me think of another night, years ago, Christmas Eve, when I was 10. Mom had handed Ethan the glass star for the top of the tree and told me to clear the table. You have smaller hands, honey, she'd said. You'll do better in the kitchen. Ethan had laughed, proud of his new responsibility. I remember standing by the sink, watching the star catch the glow from the fireplace. Even then, I understood how certain roles were assigned in our family and how rarely they changed. That memory faded back into the light of the lobby, where Mom was now surrounded by staff and wedding planners. She laughed, her voice echoing through the marble space. Thank God Claire isn't here, she said, her tone meant to sound conspiratorial, but carrying further than she realized. She has this energy. It would have thrown the balance off. Sophie nodded, whispering something that made Mom chuckle again. Exactly, she said. This is the right mix of people. The right image. Harper's jaw tightened. She doesn't even know you're standing right here. She never did. I said quietly. For a few seconds, we both watched as the photographer snapped candid shots of the family at the piano. Glasses raised. Smiles. Perfect. It would look flawless online, an image of warmth and unity. I looked down at my phone on the bar. The group chat was open. Morgan family updates. My name wasn't in the header, but somehow the messages always found their way to me through old sync settings. Mom's latest message blinked on the screen. So glad Claire isn't coming. It's for the best. She'd only make things uncomfortable. A thumbs-up reaction from Ethan followed seconds later. Then Sophie added a heart. I stared at the words for a long time, my reflection faint against the screen. Harper saw it, too. Claire. I'm fine, I said automatically, setting the phone face down on the counter. But I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I'd long since learned that anger was a luxury. They thrived on it, used it to prove they still mattered. No, what I felt now was something sharper, cleaner, a kind of cold clarity that steadied me. They still think, I said quietly, that I need an invitation to show up. Harper looked at me for a moment, then nodded, understanding. I finished my wine and placed the glass on the counter. The ice had melted into the last sip, thinning the flavor. Across the room, Mom laughed again, louder this time. The kind of laugh that made everyone look, the kind that said she belonged. I turned to Harper, my voice steady. Let her have her stage. Tomorrow she'll realize who built it. The piano music swelled, the lights shimmered, and for a brief moment, I caught my mother's reflection in the mirror behind the bar, smiling, radiant, oblivious. I met her eyes through the glass, though she didn't realize it, and lifted my empty glass in a quiet toast. To perfection, I murmured, and then I walked away, leaving the laughter behind me as the music filled the golden air. The morning of the wedding began with music. From the 12th floor office, I could hear faint violin notes drifting up from the courtyard where staff were setting up the archway. The air was cool, still scented with pine from the forest beyond the lake. It should have been a beautiful day, It was, in every visible way. Harper burst through the door, a file in her hand, her face tight. "Claire," she said, breathless, "we have a problem." I didn't look up right away. The screens in front of me displayed a dozen windows: reservations, security feeds, expense reports. The Morgan's name appeared more times than I cared to count. What kind of problem? She dropped the folder on the desk. They used the Alpine Haven corporate card again. Champagne upgrade, additional floral arrangements, decor rentals, and a live string quartet. All charged this morning. I scrolled through the digital log. The authorization signature blinked at the bottom of each invoice. Linda Morgan. I almost smiled. They're consistent, at least. Harper folded her arms. "You said to let them have what they wanted. But this is fraud, Claire. That's your company's money." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of her words hang in the air. Outside the window, sunlight hit the glass in sharp angles, reflecting the snow peaks in blinding white. "They used company assets," I said slowly, "and signed my name through hers." Harper nodded. "Exactly. So what do you want me to do?" I closed my eyes for a few seconds, listening to the faint hum of the resort beneath us. The footsteps, the music, the laughter rising from the lobby. Cancel the bridal suite. Harper blinked. "What?" "Cancel the suite. Effective immediately. List the reason as unauthorized booking under a fraudulent signature." Her face paled. "That's the main room for the ceremony prep. Sophie's been live streaming from there all morning. Are you sure?" "Yes." My voice was even. It's time they learned what boundaries look like. She hesitated, searching my expression. "You're really doing this?" "I'm not doing anything," I said quietly. "I'm just enforcing company policy." Harper stared at me a moment longer, then nodded slowly and turned toward the door. "All right." I watched her go, the click of her heels fading down the hall. For a few seconds, I sat in the silence she left behind, my pulse steady, my hands folded neatly on the desk. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability, something they'd never learned to respect. When the email confirmation pinged on my screen, I exhaled once, almost soundlessly. The order had gone through. The grand bridal suite was now marked as revoked. Downstairs, the staff would already be receiving the update. I switched the monitor view to the lobby feed. Ethan and Sophie appeared at the front desk, surrounded by wedding planners and photographers. Ethan was on the phone, pacing, while Sophie leaned over the counter, still in her silk robe, makeup half done. The concierge smiled nervously, typing rapidly on the computer. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but it appears your suite has been deactivated. There's a flag from corporate. We're not authorized to check you in." Sophie blinked, not understanding. "What does that mean?" "We're the bridal couple. It's our room." Ethan leaned forward. "This is ridiculous. My mother handled the booking." "Yes, sir," the concierge said carefully. "That's part of the issue." I could almost hear the silence that followed, thick and uncomfortable. Then Mom's voice cut through the speakers, sharp, commanding. "Excuse me," she said, stepping forward. "I'm Linda Morgan. My husband and I are the owners of this property. You will fix this immediately." The concierge swallowed, maintaining his composure. "Of course, Mrs. Morgan, but according to our records, ownership is listed differently." Ethan's tone rose. "Do you know who we are?" The concierge straightened his tie. "Yes, sir. And that's exactly why we have to follow procedure." Sophie's face flushed red. "This can't be happening. My followers are expecting the bridal suite reveal. You people are ruining my wedding." I watched as the lobby began to fill with murmurs. Guests paused mid-conversation. The string quartet trailed off uncertainly. Even the camera crew hesitated, unsure whether to keep filming. Mom's voice dropped to a low, furious hiss. Call the manager, now. They already did, I murmured to myself. Harper appeared at the edge of the frame, speaking quietly with the concierge. Then she took a breath and stepped forward. Mrs. Morgan, the decision came from corporate headquarters in Denver. I'm afraid the booking violated policy. Mom stared at her. Policy? I am the policy here. Harper stayed composed, though I could see the flicker of nerves in her posture. I'm sorry, ma'am. The authorization has been revoked by executive order. For a heartbeat, the entire lobby froze. Then Ethan slammed his hand on the counter. This is insane. I'll have your job for this. Sophie started crying, the kind of loud, dramatic sob that drew eyes from every corner of the room. A bridesmaid tried to comfort her while whispering into her phone, clearly recording. I turned off the sound and leaned back in my chair, the faint smile returning. The screen showed chaos, the kind of chaos they'd always believed they were immune to. The intercom buzzed. Harper's voice, controlled but shaky. It's done. They know. Good, I said. Let the staff keep things calm. No further engagement. She hesitated. Do you want me to unlock the suite later? No, I said. They'll stay exactly where they are. Let them experience imperfection for once. I ended the call and glanced back at the muted feed. Mom stood in the middle of the lobby, trying to pull herself together, whispering furiously into her phone. Ethan paced. Sophie's tears turned into angry shouting. From a distance, it looked theatrical, even absurd. But beneath it all, I recognized something I hadn't seen in them for years. Uncertainty. The moment when control slips through your fingers and you don't know how to get it back. I switched off the monitor and sat in the quiet again. Outside, the morning sun was climbing higher, spilling light over the peaks. Somewhere below, the wedding staff scrambled to recover, to keep guests distracted, to make the day look beautiful again. I knew they would. That's what people do when the illusion cracks. They patch it up fast and pretend nothing broke. I picked up my phone. One new message from Harper blinked across the screen. Lobby is contained. Guests unsettled but calm. The Morgans are demanding to speak to ownership. I typed back, ownership is busy. Then I set the phone down, stood, and walked to the window. The lake sparkled like glass under the sun. I could still faintly hear the string quartet starting up again, the music returning to fill the void. For the first time that day, I let myself smile. Quiet, steady, certain. They wanted a perfect wedding, I said softly. Now they'll learn what perfection costs. By noon, the lobby was chaos. The music that had played all morning had stopped, replaced by the rise and fall of angry voices echoing through the vaulted ceilings. Guests lingered near the cafe, pretending not to watch, but clearly unable to look away. Sophie stood at the center of it all, her face streaked with tears, her phone clutched tightly in one trembling hand. This is ridiculous, she shouted. Do you even know who we are? Ethan was pacing behind her, his phone pressed to his ear. Mom, calm down, he muttered, though his own voice was shaky. I'm trying to fix it. Mom wasn't listening. Linda Morgan slammed her palm against the marble counter, making the pens rattle. I will sue you, she yelled at the concierge. This is defamation, humiliation, whatever you want to call it. You can't treat us like this. The concierge, to his credit, didn't flinch. I'm very sorry, ma'am, but the system has flagged the booking as invalid. It's out of my hands. Out of your hands, she repeated incredulously. We're your owners. My husband and I own this property. Across the lobby, a group of travel journalists had just arrived to gather material for a feature on Alpine Haven's luxury hospitality program. Among them was Emily Rhodes, a reporter with a camera always ready. She raised an eyebrow, catching the scene from a distance. She whispered to the event coordinator beside her, Who are they? The Morgans, the woman said under her breath. VIP guests. Apparently, their wedding suite was canceled. Emily's eyes widened slightly, the beginnings of a smile tugging at her lips. Seriously? The coordinator nodded nervously. Apparently. Emily's camera was already rolling. From the mezzanine balcony above, I could see everything. The staff trying to calm them, the guests pretending not to stare. The way Sophie's perfect composure cracked on camera. Harper stood a few feet away from me, watching the same scene unfold on the surveillance monitors. She glanced over. Do you want me to stop the feed? I shook my head slowly, my eyes never leaving the screen. No, they're writing their own ending. I'm just watching it happen. On the main monitor, Sophie raised her voice again. Who canceled my suite? I demand to know. The concierge hesitated. According to the system, the order came directly from corporate management. What does that even mean? She snapped. It means, he said, choosing his words carefully, that the decision came from the Denver headquarters. From the top. Ethan turned sharply toward Mom. Did you do this? Did you talk to someone? Linda's jaw tightened. Of course not. Why would I cancel my own son's wedding? He ran a hand through his hair and swore under his breath. Then who the hell did? In the corner of the lobby, Emily whispered to her cameraman. Keep rolling. Linda straightened, fury hardening her tone. Call Claire, she said. She works for this place. She'll know who to talk to. Sophie sniffed, wiping her mascara-streaked cheeks. Wait, what if she's the reason this happened? Maybe she's jealous. Jealous? Ethan shot her a look, but she was already speaking to the camera crew that had started filming again. We've been treated so unfairly, she said tearfully. We came here in good faith, and now they're sabotaging our wedding. I'll make sure people know. Emily adjusted her lens, catching every second. Upstairs, Harper's voice broke through the quiet. They're losing it. The journalists are filming, guests are recording, and social media is going to explode in about 5 minutes. I took a slow sip of coffee, then let it. Harper looked at me, incredulous. Claire, this could go viral. It will, I said. That's the beauty of it. We watched as Mom turned back to the concierge, voice trembling with outrage. You don't understand. We are Morgan. My husband is Robert Morgan. That name means something here. The concierge looked genuinely sympathetic. I understand, ma'am, but according to the records, ownership belongs to Alpine Haven Holdings, registered in Denver under CEO Claire Morgan. The entire lobby seemed to inhale at once. Mom froze. What did you just say? The concierge hesitated, realizing too late what he'd revealed. It's company policy to clarify in case of conflict. Ethan's face drained of color. That can't be right. Sophie's voice broke. So she's the one. Mom turned away sharply, her voice dropping to a whisper. I could still hear through the speakers. No, that's not possible. But it was. Harper looked at me, eyes wide. Do you want me to intervene? We could still. I shook my head. No, leave it. Claire, your mother's about to. She's about to learn. I said softly. On the screen, Mom gripped the counter, the composure she'd worn like armor starting to crack. Dad had appeared now, his face tight with embarrassment. Linda, he said quietly, let's step outside. She jerked away from his hand. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Sophie's sobs turned to hiccups. Ethan stood rigid, his phone in his hand, staring at nothing. Around them, guests whispered. Phones lifted. Cameras flashed. I picked up my phone again. Another call. Ethan's name flashing. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I flipped it over, silencing it. The room around me was still, save for the low hum of the monitors. I could see everything, every fractured smile, every panic gesture, every desperate attempt to salvage the image they'd built. I spoke quietly, almost to myself. Sometimes silence costs more than words ever could. The phone stopped vibrating. Downstairs, the chaos continued. A perfectly orchestrated unraveling. I turned back to the window, the sunlight spilling across the mountains, the resort glittering beneath me. Somewhere below, my family fought to control the narrative. They still hadn't realized the story was already over, and I didn't have to say a single word to end it. 3 hours later, the world knew everything. By mid-afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Alerts, mentions, headlines, push notifications. Twitter had turned the Morgans' meltdown into entertainment. The hashtag Morgan Wedding Disaster had climbed to the top of the national feed, nestled between celebrity gossip and political scandal. The video Emily Rhodes had shot in the lobby was everywhere. Her voiceover was calm and cutting. At the Alpine Haven Resort this morning, the Morgan family, who claimed to own the property, were denied access to the bridal suite by corporate headquarters. Sources confirmed the resort's ownership lies elsewhere. The clip cut to my mother's voice, sharp and furious. "We own this place." Then the concierge's reply, soft but firm. "Actually, ma'am, that's not accurate." The image froze on my mother's stunned expression before fading to black. The internet had already looped it into memes, GIFs, and reaction videos. At the Denver headquarters, I sat behind my desk watching the chaos unfold on 3 different news streams. Harper stood by the window, scrolling through her phone. "They've turned it into a trend," she said quietly. One headline says, "Family confuses resort ownership with entitlement and gets denied at the altar." I didn't look up from my computer. Catchy. A new alert flashed. Abigail Green calling. I accepted. Her voice came through, clipped and tight. "You told me there wouldn't be a scandal." "There isn't," I said. "Claire, your family's on every major outlet in the country." "Yes, my family," I said evenly. "Not the company. Not me." "I can't have this," she snapped. "If this affects valuation, if it touches our investors." "Abigail," I interrupted, "if you think this changes anything about Alpine Haven's worth, maybe you should reconsider why you invested in the first place." There was a pause. "Don't get clever with me. If this goes south, I walk." I leaned back in my chair. "Then you'll walk away from a company with the most transparent leadership in the country. The one whose CEO refused to fake anything, even her own family." For a long moment, all I heard was her breathing. "Then you're playing with fire." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I built the fireplace." The line went dead. Harper turned from the window. "That went well." I smiled faintly, about as well as I expected. She hesitated. "PR is asking how to respond. Reporters are calling nonstop. Do you want to make a statement?" I said, "They're already telling the truth. It just took a camera for anyone to believe it." Harper nodded slowly. "Still, it's spreading fast. Someone leaked that the CEO's name matches your mother's maiden name. People are speculating." "They'll keep guessing," I said, "and when they realize, they'll stop laughing." Outside the office, the Denver skyline shimmered under the afternoon light. The hum of the city felt far away, like the sound of a different life. My computer pinged with a new message. I clicked it open. The subject line read, "From Ethan. Claire," it began. "If you have anything to do with this, please stop. Mom hasn't eaten since this morning. She's in shock. She keeps saying she didn't know. You've made your point. Please just fix it." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Harper was watching me carefully. "Something from him?" "Nothing important," I said. She didn't push. The news anchors' voices filled the room again, a chorus of smooth tones, dissecting my family's implosion like it was a political debate. One reporter gestured to the screen behind him, where an image of the Alpine Haven lobby looped endlessly. Sources suggest the Morgans attempted to leverage familial influence to gain access to restricted suites, he said. However, corporate records show the resort's ownership has no legal connection to the family. The true CEO remains unnamed. I turned off the sound and leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. In my mind, I saw Mom's face again, the look of disbelief, the panic just before the cameras caught it. I could almost hear her voice. This isn't who we are, but it always had been. The office was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. Harper finally spoke. You know they're going to try to spin this. They'll say it was a misunderstanding, that you're overreacting. They've spent their whole lives rewriting stories. I said, this time, they don't hold the pen. She studied me for a moment. You're calm. I've been calm my whole life, I said softly. That's what they mistook for weakness. Another message appeared on my screen, this time from the resort manager in Colorado. The Morgans have checked out of their rooms. They left without paying the balance. Do you want to pursue it legally? I typed back. No, let them leave owing something. That's the closest they'll ever come to balance. Harper crossed the room, setting a fresh cup of coffee beside me. You should eat something. I'm fine. You've been staring at that screen for 3 hours. I built what they tried to fake. I said, I can stare at it as long as I want. She sighed, but didn't argue. When she left the room, I stood and walked toward the window. The sun was lower now, streaking gold across the city skyline. I could see my reflection faintly against the glass, still composed, unbothered. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Ethan, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew the tone. Apology wrapped in guilt, a plea disguised as family. I let the phone buzz until it stopped. They only remember you, I said quietly, when you become the story they can't control. I turned back to the desk and pulled up the live news feed one last time. A panel of analysts was debating whether Alpine Haven stock would rise or fall after the publicity. The ticker at the bottom read, CEO remained silent amid scandal. Silent. It was the first time silence had ever sounded like victory. Outside, the light shifted and the office dimmed. I let the glow from the monitors fade into shadow, the noise of the world fading with it. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the background, the afterthought. Now, my silence was the headline, and they finally had to listen. By late afternoon, the mountains outside my office had turned gold. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, light pouring through the windows in long, slanted beams. I was reviewing a contract when there was a soft knock at the door. Peter, the operations manager, stepped in carefully. Miss Morgan, he said, his tone uneasy. The Morgan family is here. They're requesting to see you. I looked at the clock. 5:43 p.m. Send them up, I said. He nodded and disappeared. For a few seconds, I stood still, looking out the window at the horizon. The resort below looked calm again. Guests drinking by the fire pit, staff moving quietly between shifts, the kind of peace that usually follows a storm. When the elevator doors finally opened, the calm in the room shifted. Mom came in first, her expression drawn tight. The practiced poise of the morning replaced by exhaustion. Dad followed, jaw clenched, one hand on her shoulder. Ethan trailed behind them, head lowered. I didn't move. Mom stopped in front of my desk. Claire, she began, her voice uncertain. You're the CEO. I met her eyes. For 8 years now. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad broke the silence. We just wanted the day to go smoothly, he said. His voice was firm, but I could hear the cracks. We wanted a perfect wedding for your brother. You could have told us, I said. Told you what? I asked quietly. That I exist? That I built something without your permission? He flinched just barely. I reached for the folder on the desk and laid it open. Here, I said, turning it toward them. A copy of the wedding invoice, the one paid with company funds, the one signed by Mom. Mom's hand trembled as she looked down at the page. I just wanted to make sure everything was handled. I didn't think it would matter whose name. It matters, I said, cutting her off, though my tone stayed calm. It matters when you forge signatures. It matters when you spend someone else's money. It matters when you lie. Her eyes filled with tears. Claire, please. I only wanted Ethan to have one perfect day. He's worked so hard. And I haven't. I asked softly. I built this company from nothing, Mom. Every brick, every piece of glass in this building has my name behind it. But you never thought I was the kind of person who could create something worth your attention. She shook her head. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked. You called this place beautiful before you knew who built it. But if you'd known it was mine, you wouldn't have come. The words hung there between us, and no one dared to move. Ethan finally stepped forward, his voice low. I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't even know you owned Alpine Haven until today. I looked at him, my little brother, the golden boy who never had to fight for a seat at the table. That's the problem, Ethan, I said. You never asked. You never cared to know. You've spent your whole life believing that I was just lucky to be nearby. He swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the floor. You're right. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound came from the clock on the wall, ticking towards 6. Harper stood silently near the corner, watching but saying nothing. Dad cleared his throat. We can make this right. We'll release a statement. Correct the misunderstanding. No, I said, closing the folder sharply, the sound cutting through his words. You don't fix this with a statement. You fix it by telling the truth. Dad frowned. The truth? Yes, I said, that you forged documents to use company money, that you humiliated yourselves in public because you thought pretending was safer than being honest, that you've been living off appearances so long you forgot what real looks like. Mom's lip trembled. Claire, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I said, I've understood for years. The silence deepened. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Mom started crying softly, and Dad turned his gaze toward the floor. When I finally spoke again, my voice was quieter. You wanted a perfect wedding. You got your spectacle. And now everyone's seen who you really are. Mom looked up, her mascara smudged, her voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. You just never meant to see me either. The room went still again. Harper shifted slightly, but didn't move closer. I closed the folder and pushed it aside. I'm not filing charges, I said, but you should know. I could. That's what forgery means, Mom. Fraud. A real court case, not a family argument. She looked horrified. You wouldn't. No, I said, because unlike you, I don't need to prove I'm better. I just need the truth to stand on its own. Her sobs filled the quiet space. Dad reached out as if to comfort her, but stopped halfway. Ethan whispered, What happens now? Nothing, I said simply. You go home. You live your lives. Maybe this time you'll remember that owning something doesn't make it yours. For a long moment, no one moved. Finally, Mom turned away, shoulders shaking. Dad led her toward the door, his hand heavy on her arm. Ethan lingered a few seconds longer, his eyes searching mine. I really am sorry, Claire, he said quietly. I nodded once. I know. He hesitated, then followed them out. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned, thicker than before. Harper exhaled softly. You okay? I sat back in my chair, eyes on the empty doorway. I'm fine, I said, though my voice felt distant. She looked at me for a moment longer, then nodded. You did what you had to. Did I? I murmured. Harper didn't answer. I turned toward the window. The last light of the day was fading behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the floor. The air smelled faintly of rain and cold glass. Somewhere below, the staff was preparing for the evening reception, trying to make the place feel normal again. But up here, the air was still thick with everything left unsaid. I ran a hand along the edge of the desk, feeling the cool surface beneath my fingers. I don't need their apology, I said quietly. I just needed the truth to sit in the same room with them, for once. Harper didn't reply. She didn't have to. The truth was sitting right here with me. By the next morning, the story had changed hands. It no longer belonged to gossip threads or rumor columns. It belonged to headlines. CEO of Alpine Haven revealed, Claire Morgan. That was the title splashed across every major outlet. The accompanying photo had been taken 6 months ago at a company charity event, me in a navy suit standing beside my executive team, a glass of champagne in hand, smiling like someone who didn't realize she'd become a symbol. The article painted me, in flattering tones, the woman behind Colorado's most successful luxury resort chain. Quiet, private, brilliant. Every line felt surreal. It was the first time my name had ever appeared beside my success, not my family's shadow. I sat at my desk in Denver, watching the online counter climb. Views, comments, shares. My face. My name. My story. All of it was suddenly public. Across the glass walls of my office, sunlight poured in, cold and pale. Harper stepped in, holding her phone. Her expression a mix of disbelief and pride. They're calling you the invisible CEO, she said. The woman who built an empire in silence. I almost laughed. They're not wrong. She crossed her arms. The media can't get enough of you. Everyone's reposting the article. You're trending on LinkedIn and Twitter. Ironic, isn't it? I said quietly. All it took was a scandal I didn't start. She hesitated before speaking again. The Morgans shut everything down. All their accounts gone. No statements, no photos, nothing. The press is already looking for them. I nodded once. They'll stay quiet. They're better at disappearing than admitting fault. The phone on my desk buzzed. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Morgan, a call for you. Abigail Green. Put her through. There was a short click before Abigail's voice filled the line. She sounded different, less sharp, almost measured. I owe you an apology. For what? I asked. I told you I'd pull out if things went south, she said, but I've seen the reports. Your name is everywhere and not one mention of impropriety. You handled it elegantly. I was wrong about you. I smiled faintly. You weren't wrong. You were cautious. A pause. Then her voice softened. I won't be selling. I want to stay in. You're good for this company. I didn't do it to keep your investment. Abigail, I said, I did it to keep myself. The line went silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, that's why you'll last longer than people like me. The call ended. Harper, still standing near the window, asked, so she's staying? Yes, of course she is. I muttered. Everyone wants to stay when the storm clears. I looked at her, my tone gentler. Would you have stayed? Harper smiled a little. Always. The room fell quiet again. The air was still, the only sound the hum of the city below. She lingered by the door, studying me for a moment before asking softly, do you regret it? Any of it? I turned toward the window, watching the morning lights scatter across the skyline. No, I said finally. I just returned the silence they taught me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The intercom buzzed again. My assistant's voice. Someone dropped this off for you. A young staffer entered, holding a phone. My personal one, not the company-issued device. It's been ringing all morning, he said carefully. I glanced at the screen. 38 missed calls. Mom. Sophie. Over and over again. The phone vibrated again in the boy's hand. I reached out, took it, looked at the names glowing across the display, and then set it face down on the desk. Thank you, I told him. He nodded and slipped out quietly. Harper said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, Denver stretched out in shades of white and silver. Snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, dusting the glass. Funny, I said quietly, almost to myself. Everyone calls it karma, like it's supposed to burn. Harper tilted her head. And what do you call it? Peace, I said, when you no longer need to explain yourself. The wind howled faintly outside, rattling the edge of the window. After a moment, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that cleared your lungs. Below, the city hummed in muted sound, and in the distance, the mountains glowed under the weak winter sun. I leaned on the railing, closing my eyes as the first flakes of snow landed against my skin. The world felt quiet again, not empty, but balanced. Behind me, through the glass, I could see Harper still standing near my desk, arms crossed, watching the snowfall. She didn't say anything, and I didn't move to go back inside. I stayed there, letting the wind push through my hair, watching the white drift fall over the city. Karma wasn't fire. It wasn't fury or spectacle. It was this stillness, the kind that arrives when there's nothing left to defend. The phone on the desk buzzed one last time before going silent. I didn't turn around. I just kept looking at the horizon, the snow blurring the mountains into pale ghosts. Sometimes victory doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like the quiet after everything that needed to be said has already been heard. A few weeks later, the air in the valley had changed. The snow had thinned, replaced by sunlight that glowed soft and gold against the peaks. The resort had settled back into its rhythm, staff smiling, guests laughing, the sound of clinking glasses echoing through the halls. But this day wasn't about luxury. It was about something simpler, something new. Aurora Hall stood just beyond the main lodge, its tall windows catching the light like mirrors of the sky. What used to be an old service wing had been rebuilt into a space for community events, a place open to anyone who needed it. The brass letters above the doors gleamed. Aurora Hall, a home for all voices. I arrived early, the crisp air biting gently at my skin. Workers were setting up tables with fresh flowers and trays of pastries, laughter floating up from the courtyard. Guests began to arrive one by one, women from small towns who'd built their own businesses, employees who'd been with Alpine Haven since the beginning, volunteers from local shelters. Harper stood near the stage, checking the microphone levels. When she spotted me, she smiled. They're all here for you, you know. They're here for themselves, I said, straightening the small stack of note cards in my hand. That's the point. By noon, the courtyard was full. Sunlight spilled across the deck, glinting off glass and snow melt. Harper took the stage first, her voice carrying easily through the mountain air. Ladies and gentlemen, she began. Today, we celebrate more than a new building. We celebrate the idea that silence can be transformed into strength, that closed doors can lead to better ones. She turned toward me, her eyes warm. Please welcome the woman who turned silence into a legacy, Claire Morgan. The applause came like a wave, gentle at first, then growing, steady, human. I walked up to the podium, the wind brushing my hair back. For a moment, I just looked at them, the faces in the crowd, the laughter, the sense of belonging that filled the space. "Thank you," I said quietly into the microphone. "Aurora Hall isn't about me. It's about what happens when people are told they don't belong and decide to build anyway." A hush settled. I could feel the weight of the moment, the shared understanding. When I started Alpine Haven, I thought success meant being seen. I continued. But I learned something different. I learned that real success is when you create a place where everyone feels welcome, even if no one ever claps for you. I looked out toward the mountains, their peaks burning bright under the sun. Aurora Hall is for anyone who's been turned away, overlooked, or told they weren't enough. You don't need an invitation to walk through these doors. Just belief. Belief in yourself and in what you can build. The audience was quiet, listening. I saw a few people nodding, some wiping their eyes. "This," I said, gesturing around us, "is proof that the things meant to break us can become the foundation for something better. Sometimes the silence they give you isn't rejection. It's space to build your own voice." When I stepped back, Harper hugged me quickly before I could escape to the edge of the crowd. The applause rose again, brighter now, mixing with the music that started playing from the speakers. For the next hour, I wandered among the guests, talking to small business owners and community leaders, women who'd driven from towns I'd never heard of just to be here. One of them, a baker from Wyoming, grabbed my hand and said, "You have no idea how much this means to us. Someone finally built something for people like us." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted to do. As the sun began to dip lower, Harper joined me near the balcony railing, a cup of coffee in her hands. The valley below shimmered in the amber light, the snow glowing soft like silk. "So," she said, leaning beside me, "what's next?" I looked out at the horizon, where the peaks met the fading sky. "More places like this," I said. "For anyone who's ever had a door closed in their face, I want them to know they can build new ones." Harper smiled. "You really think one person can change all that?" "No," I said, "but one person can start." We stood there for a while, saying nothing. The laughter from the courtyard drifted up to us, light and real. Below, guests were taking photos near the new hall, their silhouettes framed by the last light of the day. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and snow. I breathed it in and let my shoulders drop, the tension I'd carried for years dissolving into the air. Inside the hall, the lights flickered on, warm gold against the twilight. The name, Aurora Hall, glowed softly above the entrance. I stepped forward onto the balcony, the cold air brushing against my skin, and watched as the first hints of evening settled over the valley. The mountains turned deep blue, the kind of color that only comes at the end of a long day, when the world finally exhales. For the first time in a long time, I felt still, not waiting, not proving, just being. My voice came quietly, almost carried by the wind. They said I wasn't invited. I murmured. They said I didn't belong. But every door they closed taught me how to build another one. The last of the sunlight slid behind the ridge, bathing the resort in a soft golden haze. Down below, Aurora Hall gleamed like a lantern against the snow. If they say you're not invited, build the place they'll wish they never left. The camera of memory seemed to pull back then. The resort framed by mountains, the windows glowing, laughter echoing faintly in the air. I stayed there watching the light fade, knowing that this time the silence didn't mean exclusion. It meant peace. This whole journey, from being cast aside to building my own empire, it taught me so much. What would you do if your family tried to erase you from their lives, only to stumble into a world you secretly created? Have you ever had to prove your worth without saying a single word? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your path is yours to build.